Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'm going to lay out what I think we're going to be talking about in a week's time in terms of the results. We're going to see a result which is going to shock a lot of people. We're now just a few days away. The polls have a lot of common themes, and yet what I'm seeing in the media is journalists getting cold feet. I've talked recently about how journalists who kept talking about the polls narrowing as if it was obvious they were going to narrow, and how they've now started to realise they were wrong about that. But now they're making their next mistake. Articles which are variations on the theme of, oh, I don't think Labour are going to win such a large landslide after all. And it's not just the usual suspects, it's across the board. I talked in the stream, last week, not yesterday, the last week, about James O'Brien saying the same thing. You think, so you've gone from one extreme of being wrong to the other extreme. So let me just be clear here, because I don't think I've been clear about what I expect, because it's all a bit... Labour are almost certainly going to win the biggest ever general election win. I don't mean by 1 or 2 seats. Now, yes, there are a range of possibilities, and one end of those possibilities is a mere 1997 style result. But on the balance of probabilities, that is not what we're looking at. And it's really weird that journalists are getting cold feet about this. After all, if they talked of a proper Labour landslide and we get a 1997 one instead, well, they could just say, well, the pollsters got it wrong. They'd have loads to write about. Because the pollsters are not talking about 1997. But by trying to rein back now and say, oh, it's not going to be all that special after all, like, where do they retreat from there? Don't get me wrong, they're not going to look very silly because they're all as bad as each other. They'll all cover for each other with their hot takes after the results. And let's be honest, who are most of the public listening to? Journalists or polling analysts who will be smug at the back of the room going, we did tell you, you know. But the thing is, there are a lot of polling companies about for this election. It must be more than any other election. There's loads of them. They're all using very different methodologies as well. Some will prove themselves better than others. But despite all the different pollsters and all the different methodologies, none of them are predicting 1997. They're all predicting something more, and I'll add something else into the mix as well. Because no pollster wants to predict a never-seen-before shattering of the system, even though their results are pointing to it and being wrong. So they've all been applying manual levers to their analyses in order to downplay things for Labour. They've literally, every pollster has looked at the results, or most pollsters have looked at the results and gone, yeah, that looks a bit too good for Labour. Let's just dial that down, shall we? This is why we're getting mad voting intention polls with like Labour on lower than 40% of the vote. Now, sure, voters are spreading themselves out across more parties this year. It really does feel like an election where a lot of people feel they've got more of a choice. It's not simply this two-party choice. Lots of very unusual things are happening in this election. It really is going to be a subject of study for the future. But these results are being deliberately massaged because pollsters think that what their models are really showing is too shocking. It's too much for people to believe. Now, I do keep saying there are loads of seats this year where the results look tight, which is why this year, if you're interested in tactical voting, or you people who are, this is your best year for it. It's where your tactical vote has the most power. And you look at it and you go, okay, maybe people won't turn out for Labour in enough numbers for this epoch-shattering event because they think it's a done deal. That is possible. Can I rule it out? No. It's very, very unlikely. And I'll give you 2 reasons why. First, there's a lot of increasing anecdotal evidence, of people who are very interested in politics and polling, talking to their friends and colleagues and so on, people who aren't really... They're going to vote. They're engaged enough in politics that they're going to vote, and they sort of know what's going on in the country, but they're not really paying attention to polling. So that's what the anecdotal evidence is saying, is actually most people don't actually know what the polls are saying. There's so many stories of people, as I say, talking to their friends, and they don't actually realise that Labour are on for a landslide at all. So for many voters, what's happening in this election, it's the election where the Tories have broken everything, and Labour sounds serious, and I think they're going to turn out. Or rather, I could say I see no reason why a large number of voters are going to be apathetic because they think it's a done deal, other than maybe traditional Conservative voters who recognise the need to not support the Conservatives but maybe can't bring themselves to vote for anyone else. Secondly, pollsters have been pulling on these manual levers, as I say, really hard against Labour. They really feel it's better for their reputation to predict a bit better than 1997 and see something out of this world than to predict the insane result and it ends up being nearer to 1997. But the irony is that downplaying Labour's chances actually reduces that potential for voter apathy, because even those who do see the polls and journalists talking about it go, oh, this looks okay, it looks about like 1997. With so many seats being reported as being on a knife edge, I mean, that's a pretty good antidote against voter apathy, isn't it? I don't think voter attitudes are the great threat this coming week. I think voter attitudes have been fairly stable. I think it's voter suppression issues, whether it be the fact postal ballots haven't been going out on time. That's a big issue in some areas. Voter ID issues on the day, that could be a huge issue as well. Those would be genuine sources of error, and you could not blame the pollsters for those. They can't possibly deal with that. Be interesting to see the analysis on that over the summer. But although I've been hesitant to say anything too positive about what I think, you're certainly not going to get a prediction of seat breakdowns from me. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen next Friday. It's because I know so many seats are just looking very uncertain. Like, there's always obviously a good chunk of seats that it could be close in. There's so many this time, so many. But I am also aware of the myriad extra sources of uncertainty in the data this year. I've talked about them before compared to past elections. It is a tougher election for pollsters. But I am prepared to say we are going to see. So I'd describe it as Labour's best ever result in a general election. But what I mean is the best ever for any party. Is it possible we just see a 1997 level victory? Yes, if you cover the full field of what is realistically possible. Yes, the bottom end is something like 1997. That's the bottom end. You can never say we're likely to see the bottom end of results. That's the bottom end of expectations. And the reason why we're not likely to see the bottom end, there's multiple reasons. I've gone over some of them in this video. We're actually more likely to see something nearer the top end of expectations, which would definitely generate some pretty wild discussions for the following week. But of course, the top end is not likely either by definition. The greatest source of error is actually going to be Reform UK, their share of the vote. Not only is it, as far as many voters are concerned, a new party. See, they don't see it as a rebranded Brexit party, which is a rebranded UKIP, which is a rebranded BNP and so on. So because it's a new entity as far as voters are concerned, with a new appeal and a new focus, there's no past data to really get much of a grip on it. But also it's got a top-down campaigning model. It generates its appeal from platforming in the mainstream media with relatively little funding for its main campaign activities. Which supporters may say, oh, this just shows the strength of our appeal, that we can get such support with so little money spent. But I counter that by saying, yeah, but you're getting wall-to-wall free publicity on a daily basis on the mainstream media, where more established smaller parties are almost invisible. At the local level, they've got leafleting campaign. It's not very much. My constituency is very likely to get an above average Reform UK share of the vote. So you'd think a particular target. I've had one leaflet from them and it was just a standard leaflet, the one they sent out all across the country. There was nothing about the candidate or any local issues on it. It was just bog standard leaflet. Some constituencies, yeah, they've got activists canvassing in the usual way in their target seats, but most have just set up a stall in the town centre and try and grab people on the high street as they go past. All of this makes Reform's vote potentially brittle. Then there are recent events. We don't know to what extent Farage's defence of Putin's invasion of Ukraine has had an impact on Reform's vote. We don't know the impact of the latest scandal involving the Channel 4 expose. Has Farage managed to wrap it all up as a conspiracy against him by the establishment? Even if he has, is the fact that he's having to on a daily basis keep pushing this, stopping him talking about the things which he knows attracts his support? Reform UK, I mean, let's be honest, Nigel Farage going on lots of television programmes and interviews and having to say that Reform UK are not a racist party. That's not how he brings his supporters in, is it? You know, so Reform UK are the massive unknowns. And because their support is likely to be strongly inversely proportional to Conservative support, getting the Reform support right in the polls makes a huge difference. And Reform UK is one of the areas where pollsters absolutely do not agree. There is massive variation in the share of the vote pollsters think they'll get, from more than the Conservatives to less than the Lib Dems. Both of those are extremes. The real result's going to be somewhere in between the two, but it shows just how little certainty pollsters have about Reform UK. But where pollsters do agree is on the following points. First of all, the public made their mind up some time ago that we need a change of government from the Conservatives to Labour. Under the bonnet, polling results have shown that to be a stable feeling leading all the way up to the election campaign and right throughout the election campaign. This obviously points to a very good result for Labour. We're not, after all this time of a very stable attitude in the polls, suddenly going to get a change in the last few days. Second, where there has been movement, it has been towards Labour where they need the extra votes and away from Labour where they don't. So that's areas where either Labour are already very strong or areas where actually it's the Lib Dems that are the challengers and people are voting tactically. This also points to a good result for Labour. Third, voting intention polls have maintained a healthy 20-point lead for Labour over the Conservatives. Now, just for context, in 1997, Labour had a 12.5-point lead when the results came out. That's not from polling, that's when the actual results came out. 12.5-point lead over the Conservatives. So when polls are sort of talking about 20-point leads, you would need not just one or two pollsters, you would need almost all of them to have made the mother of all errors to get the real lead when the results come out, even down to 1997 levels. And remember, 1997 is the current record holder for the biggest win for any single party ever in British history, going back before universal suffrage. You know, Labour this coming week are almost certain to beat that. And there's a good chance they're going to smash it. I think journalists are continuing to get their handle on this election badly wrong. I get the need to act on caution. I even think maybe some of them are just chancing their arm, thinking, well, if I just go with the pollsters, what am I writing about? Oh, the pollsters were right. Whereas if I say, oh, I think the pollsters are wrong, and then the pollsters are wrong, I get to say I was right and the pollsters are wrong. That's more exciting. So I think there's some gaming here with some of these journalists. But I just feel that some of them are just, for some reason, getting cold feet. I feel nervous myself trying to be too confident about anything in this mad election. But, you know, if you're going to be cautious about what pollsters disagree about, like Reform UK share the vote. Don't be cautious about what they agree on. Every now and then, yes, there's going to be a major common polling error that a lot of pollsters make. And they have to go back to the drawing board, look at what happened, start again, improve their model. That's going to happen. It doesn't happen very often. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.